Hello, Stitchers. Welcome to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. I'm your host, Lisa Woolfork. I'm a fourth-generation sewing enthusiast with more than 20 years of sewing experience. I am looking forward to today's conversation, so sit back, relax, and get ready to get your stitch together.
Hey friends, hey, it's Lisa from Black Women Stitch and the Stitch Please podcast. And as I say every week, this is a very special episode because this episode is about scissors. Yes, this episode is about scissors. I am very excited. We're going to talk about history of scissors, talk about some fun word nerdery with scissors. For example, did you know that scissors is what's called a plural tandem, which is Latin for plural only? Very exciting. We're going to get into that. Yes, I know. Calm down. It's really exciting. I know. And I'm going to give you recommendations for 4 types of scissors that I believe you will need for whatever type of sewing you're going to be doing. If you're going to be working with apparel sewing, these will be incredibly appropriate for you. But if you are working on other types of sewing as well, crafting and some quilt making, these can also be of help to you. So stay tuned and learn a bit about the history of scissors and my recommendations for the 4 types of scissors that will help you keep your sewing going. Scissors date back to ancient Egypt around 1500 BC. The earliest models that they've discovered were made of bronze. Now, fast forward to a bunch of colonization and the Roman Empire around 100 AD, we see scissors have evolved to the pivoted design that we recognize today. The way that you hold the scissors, and when you open your hand, the scissors close. When you close your hand, they open. That pivoted design is something that has been around for a very long time. Fast forward once again, and in the 18th century, Europe saw the mass production of steel scissors, which marks the birth of modern scissors in manufacturing. So again, having these things be made, we see this in the Industrial Revolution. Remember, we talked about this in terms of pins and needles, seeing pins being made by hand, but then becoming mechanized. Scissors have traveled along a similar path. Now, this is exciting to me because I am a word nerd, and the word scissors is a special word. It's what's called a plural tandem, and that is Latin for plural only. Funnily enough, plural tandem is not a plural tandem. Okay, anyway. A plural tandem is a noun that appears only in the plural form and does not have a singular variant for referring to a single object. So this means that a plural tandem refers to a noun only in its plural form. And this, I think, is really interesting. It refers to one item with 2 parts working as a set. So a plural tandem is a noun that appears only in the plural form, does not have a singular variant at all, and it refers to one item with 2 parts working as a set. So the examples that they give, which I think are really amazing, come from sewing or from apparel. So you think about pants, trousers. Actually, I might just read you the whole list because I was so excited. So there's a bunch of words in English. Well, there's about 100 words in English that are plural tandem, but a lot of them are related to apparel. And so because we do a lot of sewing over here at the Stitch Please podcast, I thought I would share with you the list of words related to apparel that are plural tandem. Yes, you are welcome. I have done this work so you don't have to. Here we go. Trousers, chaps, chinos, dungarees, flares, jeans, jeggings, jodhpurs. Leggings, Levi's, slacks, trousers. Shorts, Bermudas, shorts, trunks, underwear. Boxers, briefs, Calvin, drawers, draws, to add the AAVE. Knickers, I said knickers. Long johns, panties. Pants, suspenders, tights, underpants, undies. Isn't that amazing? So you use scissors, which is a plural tantrum, to make these things like slacks and trousers, which are also plural tantrum. Isn't that funny? Yes, it is. The plural of plural tantrum is pluralia tantrum, which I think is funny because even plural tantrum is not a plural tantrum. Coming up next, I'm going to talk about the 4 types of scissors that I believe can be beneficial in any sewing space, any creative studio, quilt studio, etc. My focus is heavily on apparel because that's what I do, but please listen to this advice and adapt it for your own needs. The first thing I think you need to have, and it's interesting, you'll notice as we go through the list of these 4 things that they start small and get larger. So to begin, thread snips. Thread snips are a handy tool to have. A thread snip, it's about maybe 3 to 4 inches overall. The blade on the thing is about maybe 1 inch or smaller. It is perfect for snipping threads close to the fabric. They've evolved over time. I like the ones that are very lightweight. And you'll notice in some of my videos or some of my live content that I will have a badge reel holder clipped to my shirt, and attached to that badge reel holder is thread snips. And I keep the thread snips there because I always need it for something. I use them to trim the thread ends when I'm releasing the needle stitches from the end of a cover stitch seam. Even though my sewing machine does trim and knot the threads, it leaves a tail, and so I will go in and snip that. Even though for the overlocker that I use, the serger that I use, I can trim the tails by dragging it along the side of the machine. Having the snip right there on my person makes it really easy to chain piece and remove it and to move really efficiently. So sharp thread snips that only snip thread. You don't need your thread snips to do all of the tasks. The thread snips are just designed to snip threads. And if it's lightweight, you can keep it clipped onto your body. The second type of scissors I'm recommending are trimming scissors. This is a hardier, more robust, a bit larger version of thread snips. Trimming scissors are designed to trim layers of fabric. I recommend a blade that's about 2 to 3 inches with a very sharp point. When you're working with a facing, for example, you need to snip the inside of the curves in the shape of a triangle, and similar for the outside. It is very easy to trim these things if you are using sharp trimming scissors. In addition, you will use these scissors to grade your seam allowances. So you'll need to get close and to cut it in layers. It gives you the opportunity to use it for a variety of projects. The third recommendation I'm going to make for the scissors that I think you need are paper scissors. It is important to have paper scissors in your craft practice. I really think paper scissors can save families. Really. Paper scissors save families because the number of people who do not know the difference between scissors and shears, or who don't understand what shears mean, and we'll get into those for my final recommendation, it's a large number. And I, as someone now who is an adult, must confess that I was a child who often, but always accidentally, used my mother's fabric scissors for non-fabric purposes. In my defense, she tied a piece of fabric around one of the handles of the scissors. And I didn't know if this meant this is only for fabric because it had fabric tied around it. I didn't know if it meant this is only for fabric because it had fabric on it, or it was, Lisa, this is for you to use because it had fabric on it. So, yeah. what I did for my paper scissors so that I would not fall into the same mistake was I write on the blade of the scissors. I write paper on the blade. I write paper on the handle so that people know that these are paper scissors. I have also very helpfully and recently started writing the word yours on the blade of the scissors. So if my family wanders down here and they're looking at the very many scissors and shears that I have along the wall for my use, they can identify which scissors they can use because it says yours. None of the other scissors have writing on them that say yours. So hopefully that's clear. We'll see. We'll see. So far, that has worked. The reason you'll want paper scissors is that you don't want to interchange the use of paper scissors with fabric. Fabric shears, and we'll talk about this next, tend to be expensive, and they need to be sharp in order to work well, in order to get the smooth cuts that you need, to get the precision. And if you are cutting cardboard with a precision tool, then you are compromising the integrity of the tool, and it's not going to work as well on fabric. And this is why people who love to sew or who invest in cutting tools that are just for fabric get very upset if you take their big scissors and use it to break down cardboard boxes for the recycling. Hey friends, hey, I know you're enjoying the audio version of Stitch Please, and thanks so much for listening. But you're missing out on all the great stuff going on behind the scenes. That's why I'm inviting you to join our Black Women Stitch Patreon. For as little as $5 a month, you can see all the video versions of the podcast. Plus, you get some amazing swatch cards. You know how much I love these swatch cards. Look, see how cool these are? You can't see them because you are not yet on the Patreon. So when you join the Patreon, you'll be able to see this, me showing you these amazing cards. We also have some great perks at the other tiers, like discounts, swag, office hours, and more. Don't be the last sewist in the group now. Head over to patreon.com/blackwomenstitch or click the link in the show notes and become a Patreon supporter today. We truly cannot do this without you. So thank you so much. Paper scissors are useful for cutting out patterns. They're useful for cutting out fusible interfacing. They're good for cutting out fusible web, vinyl, lots of other things that you might not want to jeopardize your quote unquote good scissors or dressmaking shears or tailor shears for. The paper scissors can do this. Something that I also do, because the scissors that I use can be difficult to sharpen, I tend to retire my scissors. I retire my dressmaking fabric or my fabric shears or my tailor shears or sewing shears. I retire these and turn them into paper or cardboard or craft scissors because they are still good enough. They're not strong enough. They're not good enough for cutting fabric, but they are good enough for other things. And that's when I write the word paper on the blade or yours so that other people know they can use it. The fourth type of scissors that I am recommending is something you have probably already guessed, and that is the shears, dressmaking shears, tailor shears, sewing shears, fabric shears, what my mother would call my good scissors. These are essential for cutting large pieces of fabric. Typically, they range from about 8 inches to 9 inches, 8 inches to 12 inches. Some of them are very big. And, there are folks who can use those with great ease. They're very strong and precise and cut very cleanly. But you also, but there's a trade-off for that in terms of the weight and the dexterity. At least for myself, that's what I found for myself. So you'll want to decide what works best for you, for the size of your hand, for the way that you cut, for the materials you're going to be using. But typically know that the shears of this type, or the dressmaking shears or fabric shears, range from about maybe 8 inches as the smallest up to 11 or 12 and sometimes up to 13. Just to note, these shears are measured from the tip of the blade to the end of the handle. So the blades themselves are not 8 inches long or 9 inches long. This is the entire length of the scissors. I also want to clarify that there is a difference between shears and scissors. Scissors have symmetrical finger holds, the blades move differently, but for shears, one of the clearest ways you can tell the difference between scissors and shears is that shears have blades that are over 6 inches, and they have asymmetrical finger holes and a bent handle for stabilized cutting. And in contrast, scissors have a symmetrical design with circular finger holds and a short, straight blade aligned between the grips. So the shears are more specialized. The shears are designed for fabric. The shears will cost more. I think this is also true for hair cutting and hairstyling. Like, I think the shears that they use are specialized tools, and they're also expensive, and they care well for them because they make their living with them. I think this is true for sewing tools as well. You want to keep them in the best shape possible. You want to get the best tool that you can afford at the time because it's going to make your practice that much easier. And fabric shears, having exclusive fabric shears, is a first step in building out your literal toolkit for how you want to sew well, how you want to sew easily, how you want sewing to be something that's not a struggle. And it can be a struggle to try to cut something out with scissors that are not responding well. That is a recipe for frustration. Seriously. Ask me how I know. Now, I want to talk a little bit. I want to close this episode thinking about buyer considerations. What kind of things do you need to think about when you are choosing your scissors? Consider the differences we discussed today. Remember, we went over the 4 types. The first one is a thread snip, then trimming scissors, paper scissors, and fabric shears. And I'm saying fabric shears, dressmaker shears, tailor shears interchangeably. But these are specific shears with a blade that's about 6 inches long that is only for cutting fabric. That is all it's for. It is not for anything else. Now that you know that these are the 4 that you might want to get, what is your next step? Think about your needs. What are you going to be sewing? Do you think about your own body? The ergonomics of the scissors are incredibly important. The weight of the scissors are crucial. And it's not just like what's a bestseller or what's really popular. It's what works for you. And I know this because I was working with some very heavy scissors that everyone said you just had to have. And I ended up with an injury because I was cutting through lots of layers of fabric. I was fighting through it. The scissors were sharp and they were fine, but they were too heavy for me. And I ended up with a brace on my wrist and having to do some physical therapy because I was cutting a zillion napkins and I was using these scissors for it. And just be kind to yourself. Think about the longevity. Think about building a relationship with this tool. This is something that is going to be incorporated into your practice, and you don't want it to be something like when you look at it, you go, ugh, oh my gosh, that's what I have to use now. So just keep that in mind. Also, to avoid repetitive use injuries, that was an operator error on my part. There was no way I should have been trying to cut through 8 layers of denim with scissors like that. That is what electric scissors are for. They do make electric scissors that are made to cut through layers of fabrics. They also have electric rotary cutters that do the same thing. So be mindful, be wise when you are using your tools. I mean, the tool is only as good as the use to which we put it. So when it comes to managing or avoiding repetitive use injuries, here's a few things you can think about. Spring-loaded scissors. I am a big fan of spring-loaded scissors. These really help reduce hand strain. They make my sewing more comfortable. Lots of different brands offer spring-loaded scissors. So if that's something that you think you would need or wanted to investigate, check that out. You can Google spring-loaded scissors, and I'm sure a bunch of things will come up. Take breaks with your cutting. You can take breaks. That is okay. If you find yourself getting tired, if you find your hands starting to get weary, put it down, take a break, walk away, get some water, and come back. Don't try to force your way through it, because I think that leads to mistakes or even injury. Do your best to maintain your scissors by keeping them clean, wiping off the blades. Like if you've done something sticky or messy, for example, with your paper scissors, you can use something like Goof Off to remove that adhesive and have those ready for the next paper project. There's also ways to sharpen your scissors by sending them to places. I also know that some local places, like butcher shops, there's a butcher shop in my area that offers scissors sharpening. I guess the guy comes, and it's usually a guy. The guy comes and will sharpen knives, but if you bring your scissors, he will sharpen those too. So think about that as you start to build out your collection as well. Say you find a pair of scissors or you find a pair of shears that you like, but it's kind of dull. Is getting it sharpened an option that you can do? And I think that would be something to get in good practice of. I would like to be a little bit better about that. But this is why we all learn together. Okay, so to recap, thanks so much, y'all, for listening to this episode about scissors. We talked some about the history of scissors, and we discussed also, I got very excited about the plural tantrum, the idea of the scissors being a plural tantrum. Thank you for joining us for this episode discussing the plural tantrum. I am very excited about that. We talked about the history of scissors and the 4 types you need in your sewing kit as you're just getting started, and some ways to choose them. Remember, the 4 that we discussed were thread snips, trimming scissors, paper scissors, and fabric shears. If you invest in those 4 types, this will cover a lot of ground for many years until you start to invest in more specialized tools. But for now, I think those 4 things will get you very, very far. It's helping you to develop a good practice and to have a good experience. Don't be afraid to choose well for yourself. So thank you so much for listening. Come back next time and we will help you get your stitch together.
You've been listening to Stitch Please, the official podcast of Black Women Stitch, the sewing group where Black Lives Matter. We appreciate you joining us this week and every week for stories that center Black women, girls, and femmes in sewing. We invite you to join the Black Women Stitch Patreon community with giving levels beginning at $5 a month. Your contributions help us bring the Stitch Please podcast to you every week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support, and come back next week and we'll help you get your stitch together.